Evening. Good evening. It's playoff basketball now, so, Jeff and I happen to coordinate unplanned, but we are in Genesis chapter 47. Jeff did a great job last week with chapter 46, getting Jacob to Egypt, and we only have a few more chapters left of Genesis, so very exciting stuff. Now we have a little kind of segue here, a little time where we get half of kind of family life and then a section of Joseph's work life that's kind of interesting. So we'll go ahead and start with verse 1 and just pray over God's word. Lord, God, I just pray that you would open our hearts, speak unto our lives, make it fresh and real, that we could be right with you, that we could have just a deeper understanding into the scriptures this evening. Fill us with your spirit, Lord, in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen. So verse 1, chapter 47, Genesis, it says, "Then Joseph went and told Pharaoh and said, 'My father and my brothers, their flocks and their herds, and all that they possess have come from the land of Canaan. And indeed they are in the land of Goshen.' And he took 5 men from among his brothers and presented them to Pharaoh." I don't know if this strikes you as odd, but Joseph's got a lot of brothers, but he only chose 5. It's kind of interesting. It doesn't tell us who he chose or why he chose, which could also be interesting. You decide who you want to bring to Pharaoh. It's like, no, not you, right? Maybe it's a process of elimination or whatever that is. The interesting thing to me, if you're a numbers person, I'm not totally a numbers person, but 5 is the number of grace. And I think it's just grace that has brought Joseph to this place, right? I mean, for a lot of us, maybe you can think the same in your life. Like, man, grace is what has brought me to this place. God's gracious, faithful hand. The fact that Joseph is alive, the fact that he is in a position of power, the fact that his brothers are forgiven, that his family is being reunited, that the family is going to survive the famine, right? All of these are undeserved blessings of God. All of these are just the grace of God. If this is a late night for you and you're not going to remember anything else, just remember it's the grace of God that's brought us to this place, right? It's his grace and will continue to be. So picking up in verse 3, now that he's got his 5, the 5 guys that he's chosen, it says, "Then Pharaoh said to his brothers, 'What is your occupation?' And they said to Pharaoh, 'Your servants are shepherds, both we and also our fathers.' And they said to Pharaoh, 'We have come to dwell in the land, because your servants have no pasture for their flocks. For the famine is severe in the land of Canaan. Now therefore, please let your servants dwell in the land of Goshen.'" Now if you remember from before, last week, when Jeff was sharing, Joseph told them the Egyptians don't like shepherds, right? Like it's kind of like, yeah, that's great, but not that great. Don't be too close. So this is a bit of a strategy, right? There's a little bit of forethought to saying, hey, tell them you're shepherd. Make sure that he knows that you guys are shepherds, because he's not going to be thrilled about having you guys in close, and we want to be in Goshen. So they know where they want to be. They know how the Pharaoh feels about it. The Egyptians feel about the shepherds, and so they're going to have their own space. In other words, that's kind of what's happening. And Goshen is a fruitful place for them to be. So they share how they're shepherds. They share how that's where they're at right now. Then Pharaoh spoke to Joseph, saying, "Your father and your brothers have come to you. The land of Egypt is before you. Have your father and brothers dwell in the best of the land. Let them dwell in the land of Goshen. And if you know any competent men among them, then make them chief herdsmen over my livestock." This just strikes me as such a change, right? Such a change to go from where Joseph was to having this kind of personal conversation and Pharaoh himself speaking these things to Joseph. Like, first thing, just noticing right off the bat, is that the brothers are actually listening to Joseph. Joseph gave them advice, and they followed it. Joseph was like, listen, say they're your shepherds. We want to be in Goshen. And they're like, we're shepherds. And we want to be, like, they're actually listening to their younger brother. He's gotten to the point where he's being respected, right? He's gotten to the point where he's being listened to. It reminds me, Jesus said, wisdom is justified by her children, when he was talking about John the Baptist and some of the problems that the Israelites, or the Jews specifically, were having with John and Jesus and their differences. And he's like, listen, like, wisdom is justified by her children. In other words, like, the proof is in the pudding. The results are what is demonstrating the validity of this wisdom. And in a sense, like, Pharaoh is now looking to Joseph because his wisdom has been proven. Right? They went through the 7 years of plenty, and now they're in this time of famine. And so Pharaoh is, he's looking to Joseph. His brothers are looking to him. And then he makes this comment. He says, the land is before you. In other words, like, blank check. Right? Like, you know what, Joseph? Whatever you want. Pharaoh knows, and we're going to see at this end of this chapter, like, Pharaoh is getting his money from the investment of Joseph. Like, he is going to be even richer, have more because of Joseph's work and Joseph's wisdom. And so basically, Pharaoh's just like, listen, dude, whatever you want, the land is before you. And what a great promise, right? What a great offer for Pharaoh to just say, whatever you want. And he's like, you want Goshen? Goshen. Goshen is yours. And then he even goes further, demonstrating this kind of reliance and trust in Joseph's wisdom. And he's like, hey, if you know anyone, hire them. Right? You hire your own family. If you know they're competent, I trust you. Hire these people. Like, that is such an interesting thing to say, right? He doesn't need to say this. He's like, hey, your family's come. That's great for you. Go. But he's like, hey, your family's come anywhere you want, and whoever you want to hire. Like, Joseph is in this huge place of trust. And I think it goes back to his patience, his perseverance, his integrity, his faith, right? These are the things that have built the bedrock of Joseph's character. And when God is building a foundation, it takes time, and it's often painful, right? And Joseph's building period was time-consuming and painful. And there's not any way to build a solid building without a foundation, right? We've talked about the same kind of thing in James, having that solid foundation and building according to the truth and what is right and good. And so, Joseph has gone through this process, and now he's in this place of, like, blessing and reward, and it's all worth it. It's all worth it. And you and I are going to get to that point. If you get to that point in this world, that's a blessing. If you get to that point in eternity, that's an even greater blessing, right? To know, man, well done. He was a good and faithful servant through the difficulties and the blessings. So then he goes on in verse 7, Joseph's going to bring Jacob to Pharaoh. So I think, I don't know if the first 5 guys were kind of like a little test case, like, all right, I'm going to bring my 5 best brothers to Pharaoh, see how it goes. Now I'll bring dad. Verse 7, it says, then Joseph brought in his father Jacob and set him before Pharaoh. And Jacob blessed Pharaoh. Pharaoh said to Jacob, how old are you? And Jacob said to Pharaoh, the days of the years of my pilgrimage are 130 years. Few and evil have been the days of the years of my life, and they have not attained to the days of the years of the life of my fathers and the days of their pilgrimage. So Jacob blessed Pharaoh and went out from before Pharaoh. So I don't know if there's any more to this conversation, but the couple things that are recorded for us is interesting, right? As he starts off with this, like, how old are you? Right? 130 years old is Jacob at this point. And he's going to continue to live for many other years. We'll see. 130 years he's been on this pilgrimage. Not not the attainment of his forefathers, right? Abraham and Isaac lived much longer than that even. And so he says, few and evil. And I think there's a sense of humility there, right? There's a sense of humility as Jacob, and changed name to Israel, as he has it gone on and through the life experiences and the ups and the downs and difficulties and all that he has gone through, right? Like so many issues and things that we've seen, and he's like, man, few and evil. And not, he's not like, 130 great and grand years. I'm a very important person, Pharaoh. He's just like, few and evil. And Jacob had a lot of evil days, as we've kind of seen through his life. But I want to point out this word pilgrimage. I think it's interesting that he describes his life as a pilgrimage. He describes his father's days of their pilgrimage. I'm not a Hebrew scholar, but it is the word magur. Magur is the word here, and there's an interesting connotation in Hebrew for this. It's used several times throughout Genesis. But it has the idea of wandering. It has the idea of being kind of a temporary abode, right? Like I don't have a home. I'm a pilgrim. I'm on pilgrimage. Being a stranger. It comes up a few other times in Genesis as one that's a stranger. And Genesis chapter 17, if you want to flip back a little bit, God said to Abraham, he was going to be a pilgrim, that he was a stranger. It says in Genesis 17, verse 8, God says, "And I will give unto you and to your seed after you the land wherein you are a stranger, all the land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I will be their God." And so the prediction at the very beginning, when God begins to speak to Abraham, now this is going back like so many years, right? Such a long period that we've journeyed through, but at the very beginning in chapter 17, when God appears and speaks to Abraham, he tells him, you're going to be a stranger. You're a pilgrim. You don't have a permanent residence. I'm going to bless you, and this land is going to be yours, but you are a pilgrim. And then later in Genesis 28, Isaac uses the same word as he blesses Jacob. So see, Jacob is picking up this word that was used by God to his to his grandfather, and then that was used from his father to him. And there's a legacy that's being passed down. There's a family history. There's an identity, right? The identity is we're pilgrims. We're on a pilgrimage. And even as he speaks to Pharaoh, he gives that same identity of like, this is not my home. I've been on pilgrimage. I am a stranger. I want to read to you, if you want to flip over, you can. Genesis chapter 28, the first few verses there. I think it's interesting because we'll talk about it in a second. Just as Jacob blesses Pharaoh, Isaac blessed Jacob. And he used this description. It says, Isaac called Jacob and blessed him and charged him and said to him, "You shall not take a wife from the daughters of Canaan." Remember this? "Arise, go to Padan Aram, to the house of Bethuel, your mother's father, and take yourself a wife from there, of the daughters of Laban, your mother's brother." Remember Laban? Kind of a character. Verse 3, "May God Almighty bless you and make you fruitful and multiply you, that you may be an assembly of peoples, and give you the blessing of Abraham to you and your descendants with you, that you may inherit the land in which you are and this is the word, stranger, pilgrim, which God gave to Abraham." So Isaac sent Jacob away, and he went to Padan Aram to Laban, the son of Bethuel the Syrian, the brother of Rebekah, the mother of Jacob and Esau. So here again, it's that identity of pilgrim. And we'll see it come up at the very end. We'll kind of retouch on this. But it's relevant for us. And we'll see this. I'm going to pick it up at the end. But this earth is not our home. That's the same idea that's applied to us in Christ. This earth is not our home. We are temporary residents made for eternity. And we're just moving through. That's why we're not laying up treasures, as we talked about on Sunday. We're not laying up treasures here because this isn't our place. How foolish it would be to lay up treasures where you're not going to be, right? Where we're going to be is in heaven. We're going to be in the presence of God, and that's why the treasures are meant to be there. You notice that he prayed for him that he would inherit the land, right? Like Jacob, I pray that you inherit the land. I hope that you have the blessing of Abraham. You hope that you inherit the land, and he didn't inherit the land. His family would inherit the land, but it would be hundreds of years later. And again, this is that picture of faith. But what Isaac did for Jacob, what Abraham did for Isaac, is he blessed him, right? There's a blessing. And sometimes when you're on pilgrimage, when you're a pilgrim just moving through, that's how you help other people move forward, is by blessing them. The blessing of God coming through you to them moves them forward in their pilgrimage, right? The encouragement, the word of truth, the blessing of God. And God is a God of blessing. And when God is in us, we are a people that bless people. We don't come to condemn, right? But to be a blessing and to bring blessing. And that's interesting what he does when he meets Pharaoh, as it says that he blessed Pharaoh. Now, that's an uncommon thing because Pharaoh was considered a god in Egypt. So that Pharaoh would receive a blessing from Jacob was significant. They thought Pharaoh was like the incarnation of Ra, right? Like he was a big deal. Like you don't bless me, I bless you. Now get out, right? But he received the blessing as Jacob is a servant of the true and living God. And no doubt is an impressive 130-year-old man that Pharaoh was willing to give honor to him, and the father of Joseph, who Pharaoh was honoring. So some interesting dynamics, I think, in that short little conversation. Verse 11, it goes on, and it says, "And Joseph situated his father and his brothers and gave them a possession in the land of Egypt, in the best of the land, in the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. Then Joseph provided his father, his brothers, and all his father's household with bread, according to the number in their families." So now he's brought them in, they've come, and he's given them the best place. They went from thinking Joseph is dead, from on the verge of starvation, to now being moved into Egypt, meeting with Pharaoh, and in the best place in the land. Like, that's the blessing of God. Like, they don't have a land yet, but the land that they have been given in a temporary way is a good land. It's a good place. It's going to be a fruitful place, and you're going to see they're going to be fruitful and multiply, right? Going all the way back to that Adam covenant. They're going to be fruitful and multiply in this fruitful place that God gives them. But what I want you to notice is that Joseph here takes care of his family first. There's an interesting element, right? That's a great lesson for us, is what he has been given, even though he hasn't been around his family for years now, is when they show up, their first priority. He takes care of his family, makes sure that they're in the right place, make sure that they're provided for, and then now we'll see he gets to work. So, if you're setting those priorities, like for Joseph, obviously over and over, God was a priority. God was with him. He served God. He had integrity with his relationship with God. Then now, even though he was separated from his family, now family is key. And as soon as they come in, like, he sets them up, he introduces them, he gives them provisions. And now it's going to give us a little bit of insight into his work. And work and family need to have the right order, right? That the family is what God has given you personally, right? As a father, as a mother, that's your family. That's what God gives. Now, God gives us occupations that change over life, but your family is who you're born with, or maybe who chose you, however that goes, right? If you're adopted. But your family is the key, and then the work comes second. And we don't want to get that out of order. So verse 13 now is going to describe part of and how Joseph worked over the next several years. very, again, strategically, shrewdly for the Pharaoh. Now there was no bread in all the land, for the famine was very severe, so that the land of Egypt and the land of Canaan languished because of the famine. And Joseph gathered up all the money that was found in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan for the grain which they bought. And Joseph brought the money into Pharaoh's house. Right? So now Pharaoh he's getting money from Canaan. He's getting money from Egypt. All of the people are bringing him money. He's getting rich. So verse 13, so when the money failed in the land of Egypt and in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians came to Joseph and said, give us bread, for why should we die in your presence? For the money has failed. We don't have any more money. So Joseph's like, all right, so give your livestock. So he says in verse 16, give your livestock, and I will give you bread for your livestock if the money is gone. So they brought their livestock to Joseph, and Joseph gave them bread in exchange for the horses, the flocks, the cattle of the herds, and for the donkeys. Thus he fed them with bread in exchange for all their livestock that year. Right? So they would come once a year. They got their exchange. They brought all the bread with them, or the seed, or what have you. Verse 18, when that year had ended, they came to him the next year and said to him, we will not hide from my lord that our money is gone. My lord also has our herds of livestock. There's nothing left in the sight of my lord but our bodies and our lands. Why should we die before your eyes, both we and our land? Buy us and our land for bread, and we and our land will be servants of the Pharaoh. Give us seed that we may live and not die, that the land may not be desolate. It's kind of interesting. A lot of people, not a lot, but there are some commentators who definitely take issue with this, that Pharaoh would buy these people. But in actuality, these people are offering themselves, right? This wasn't his idea. This was their idea. They're like, hey, listen, we don't have any more money. We don't have any livestock. We're here to serve you. We've got land in ourselves, and we don't want to die. We don't want this land to die. And honestly, it's like they're basically in the place where I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to do whatever it takes to continue to live and to have a family and to take care of our land, all of that stuff. But it actually reminded me of Mark chapter 36. Mark chapter 36, verse 36. 8:36, sorry, not chapter 36. Mark chapter 8, verse 36. For what will it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his own soul? I just thought it was kind of an interesting idea. They're like, listen, if we die, we've got nothing. So we'd rather be your servants. But to make it a spiritual thing, right, to have that next level of okay, how do we think of that spiritually? It's like, what will it profit a man if you gain the whole world and lose your soul? They don't want to lose their soul. They don't want to lose their life, so I'm sold to you. I'll be your servant. You can have my land. And in that same way, it's this reversal of man, I get so attached to my life. I get so attached to my land that I miss out on what God has for me, right? These people are willing to give up everything just to have another day. And sometimes we're not willing to give up anything because we're afraid of what we'll lose. And the reality is, what you'll lose, you don't have anyway. Right? Your life is a vapor. It's temporary. And so gaining the whole world and losing your soul, that's not a good deal. It looks like it's a good deal for a minute, right? For the length of our life even, you might think, oh, this is great. Look at that. But I've lost my soul. There's not anything more valuable than the soul that God has given you. And for them, it's hey, there's nothing that's more valuable than my land and myself. And they're willing to sell it. So verse 20, then Joseph bought all the land of Egypt for Pharaoh. For every man of the Egyptians sold his field because the famine was severe upon them. So the land became Pharaoh's. And as for the people, he moved them into the cities from one end of the borders of Egypt to the other end. So all these people no longer are farming their own land, so they come into the cities. Only the land of the priests he did not buy, For the priests had rations allotted to them by Pharaoh, and they ate their rations which Pharaoh gave them. Therefore, they did not sell their lands. This is a similar practice as what happens in Israel later with the Levites, right? God gives, Joshua distributes the land, and the priests, the Levites, are given certain cities and certain places, and God is their provider. So in this way, Pharaoh is providing for his kind of pagan priests. So they're being taken care of. Egyptians and, all of the Middle East, all of the ancient world really were very religious, right? Very superstitious. And so the last people that you're going to want to die are the priests. That's your connection to God. And so they do have that priority of taking care of the priests. Verse 23, then it says, Joseph said to the people, "Indeed, I have bought you and your land this day for Pharaoh. Look, here is seed for you, and you shall sow the land. And it shall come to pass in the harvest that you shall give 1/5 to Pharaoh. 4/5 shall be your own as seed for the field and for your food, for those of your households, and as food for your little ones." So he's got a little tax going now, right? It's like, okay, you lost this, you don't have this, now I'm going to give you seed, but you're going to have to pay me 4/5, or 1/5 rather, right? This 20%. So what is their response? No taxes. No, they say, "You have saved our lives. Let us find favor in the sight of my Lord, and we will be Pharaoh's servants." I think this is such a really interesting understanding, right? There's that, going back to that idea of like, man, I'm afraid to serve the Lord. I'm afraid to, fully commit to serving God, or I'm afraid to trust God with everything. Their attitude is what our attitude should be. Their attitude is what? You've saved our lives. Like, whatever you want. Whatever you call me to. Like, everything I have is yours. He's like, 20%. They're like, sure. We'd be dead without you. Everyone else is dead. Everyone else is starving, right? Like 7 years of famine. Egypt, because of Joseph, because of the grace of God, is the only place that has anything going. And so they're like, listen, we got nothing without you. Where else are we going to go, right? Like the disciples, where else are we going to go to find the words of eternal life? And that's their heart, as the heart of a servant. Now, some people, may be like, wow, that's pretty harsh. Here they are struggling, and now you're taking 20%. Some people say that that's actually a gracious number, that there were certain countries, certain leaders that they were taking 60, 50%. So 20%, 1/5 is actually not exorbitant at the time. Verse 26, Joseph made it a law over the land of Egypt to this day that Pharaoh should have 1/5, except for the land of the priests only, which did not become Pharaoh's. So Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen, and they had possessions there, and grew and multiplied exceedingly. And Jacob lived in the land of Egypt 17 years. So the length of Jacob's life was 147 years. When the time drew near that Israel must die, he called his son Joseph and said to him, "Now, if I have found favor in your sight, please put your hand under my thigh and deal kindly and truly with me. Please do not bury me in Egypt, but let me lie with my fathers. You shall carry me out of Egypt and bury me in their burial place." And he said, "I will do as you have said." Then he said, "Swear to me." And he swore to him. So Israel bowed himself on the head of the bed. Kind of interesting, couple things point out real quick is the time that Joseph was with his father, Jacob, was 17 years in Canaan. And then they were separated, and now they've been reunited, and 17 years again. So this first 17 years and these last 17 years for Jacob's life, he had that reunion with his son, and by all indications, just blessing, right? Just fruitful, just thankfulness. I think that's kind of a cool, comparison of God's grace as well, like how God gave him that time back that he thought was lost, and God restored that to him. Also, 147 years, that is quite a time. But what he's concerned about, though, it's kind of interesting. And he brings Joseph, none of the other sons, right? He doesn't tell any of the other guys. I don't know if he ever had their trust again. I don't know if that trust was restored with the rest of his boys. But he brings in Joseph, and he's like, listen, there's one thing I care about. My grandkids? No, sorry. my riches here, my this, that. No, what is he looking at? He's like, listen, I'm still a pilgrim. And I still have a home and a promise and a land. And when I die here, I want to be buried there. That's where my heart is, right? That's where my faith is. That's where the promises of God will be fulfilled. And that, swear to me, like this is important, this is a big deal. That's really what he cares about. He's looking beyond. And it reminds me of Hebrews chapter 11. Several pieces of Hebrews talks about this section, but Hebrews 11:13 says, all these people were still living by faith when they died. They did not receive the things promised. They only saw them and welcomed them from a distance, admitting that they were foreigners and strangers, pilgrims on the earth. People who say such things show that they are looking for a country of their own. If they had been thinking of the country they had left, they would have had opportunity to return. Instead, they were longing for a better country, a heavenly one. Therefore, God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. You and I, as we close, we are pilgrims, dependent on the grace of God. Right? Like this isn't our home. We're not locked into this place. Our desire, our heart should be in heaven. We shouldn't just be storing up the treasures and worrying about all the things. It's like, listen, like this is fine. They were blessed, they multiplied, they lived there. But his roots, his heart, that was back in the promised land. That was back in Canaan. And that's where you and I, we have that hope. We have that heavenly home, as Hebrews puts it. We're looking beyond this country to a better one. And man, the place that God has for us is so much better because he is so much better. 1 Peter gives us a little bit of encouragement. 1 Peter 2:11 says, beloved, I beg you as sojourners and pilgrims, abstain from fleshly lusts which war against the soul. And that's all kinds of desires. He's like, just abstain from that. Keep away from all the desires that drag and pull and entice and draw you in. You're a pilgrim. You're a stranger in this land. Like, live like you are a resident of heaven. Because that's where God intends you to be, and that's where you will be. That's where we will be for eternity. So let's pray. Father, what a cool chapter to see here, this life of Joseph, and to see how you've lifted him up, how you blessed him and used him, even though you tore him down as well. Lord, you brought him down to the dirt, and then you lifted him up, and he was able to lift others up. He was able to be a blessing, and even Jacob got to the point where he was a blessing. And I just pray that you would help us, God, in our pilgrimage, that we wouldn't get so attached to the things of this world, but we would be concerned about being a blessing while we're here and looking towards the treasures that we have laid up in heaven with you, that your home would be in our hearts, but that our hearts would be yours. In Jesus' name, amen. Amen.